Once upon a time, there was a Mini 3 Pro that was flying around in a park and stopped to take a rest. There was also a Mavic 3 in the same park that decided to do the same thing. Both of them caught each other's eyes and found out that they liked each other. From that point on, they spent lots of time together and developed a loving relationship that led them to having a baby. They then named that baby the Air 3. The Air 3 had the best parts of both parents, and they all lived happily ever after. Okay, so that was a pretty weird story, but that's the one I imagine, since the DJI Air 3 has the best parts of both the DJI Mini 3 Pro and the DJI Mavic 3. What we're gonna do though is take a look at whether the Air 3 really does strike that perfect balance, or whether you might want to go for one of the other two drones I mentioned. Oh yeah, and before you say anything about my story, just remember I did try to keep it as rated G as possible. I don't usually go over the price in my drone reviews, but it's a pretty important factor here. I've never had any dealing with the Air series, but it's pretty understandable that it falls smack dab in the middle of the Mini and Mavic series. Pricing for the Air 3 starts at $1,099 for the drone with the all new, but doesn't seem like it, RC-N2 controller. That price then goes up by $300 and comes with the RC-N2 and the Fly More kit. The last price goes up by $200 on top of the price I mentioned before, and comes with the new and improved, and it definitely is improved, DJI RC2 and Fly More kit. The Air 3's design is heavily influenced by the Mavic 3 line, and I feel like this is a good thing since it gives the perception that you own one of the Mavic series, at least until you look at the name on the right arm. You've also got the similar stocks like the Mavic 3 series, which are both good and annoying at the same time. Good for those times you plan to land your drone on a surface if you aren't hand catching it, and annoying because you have to remember to pull these arms out first, or else you have to do it all over again. The materials DJI used here lend themselves to that good feeling you'll get when you pick up this drone. The casing feels very solid with no hollow feeling around it, and makes the UAV feel very premium. One change that I found to be interesting is the fact that the gimbal doesn't seem to lock in place once you power off the drone. This is a big deal since the gimbal cover for the Air 3 can be sort of hard to put on. You eventually get the hang of it, but when the gimbal is moving around freely, it's pretty annoying. The Air 3 also has a good weight to it, which adds to its premium perception and also bodes well for wind resistance, which we'll get into later. I personally don't like the placement of the charging port and memory card slot being at the bottom. There are those out there who might land their drones in the dirt or grass, and I'd imagine that even with this cover here, some of that dirt could be kicked up into these ports. It makes it even more concerning that this cover here is held on by one little small piece of rubber. If for some reason this comes off, then now these parts are exposed permanently. I do like and am surely a fan of the quick release props you get with the Air 3. If you've watched my Mini 3 Pro review, you'd know that I'm not a fan of the props on it because the screws are so easy to strip. Needless to say, that will not be an issue here though. All in all, it's really crazy just how much this feels like a Mavic 3 but smaller and less break your back in a bag like. As it stands right now, the Air 3 can be operated with one of two controllers, the RC-N2 and the DJI RC2. I got this with the RC2 and the experience here hasn't been that different for me. I'm used to flying with the original RC already, and I didn't have many issues with that controller with the exception of it being very slow. But the most obvious difference you'll see here when compared to the RC is the antennas, and the fact that the back is now extended outwards. There's also the fact that you no longer have a cover on the bottom and you only get one USB Type-C port to work with. Though we were robbed from having two Type-C ports, one thing that we did gain is the ability to connect the RC2 to a computer via USB-C. This is something I could not figure out how to do with my regular RC, my original RC at that, but I am glad that they have brought this functionality to the RC2. Now, there's definitely more to the RC2 that we could talk about, but I already did a full video comparing both the RC and the RC2. If you do care about the differences, then I'd suggest taking a look at that video, But all in all, the RC2 is definitely a great upgrade and one that you should definitely go for. The camera is where the Air 3 starts to take on the aspects of the Mini 3 series. There are a lot of opinions about the cameras on the Air 3, but one thing is for sure, that either way you slice it, two cameras are better than one. The Air 3 has a dual camera setup and both of its camera sensors are the same size as the sensor in the Mini 3. This might scare some people away, especially those that had the Air 2S with its 1-inch sensor or already have one of the Mini 3s, but stick around for a few and you'll see that there were definitely improvements made. The Air 3 may use the same sensor sizes as the Mini 3 series for both of its cameras, but those cameras are put together in what's called a stacked sensor format, which opens up capabilities like much faster image processing and overall better performance of these sensors, even though they are as small as the Mini 3 series. You can see here that the Air 3 is able to show things with much more detail when it comes to the shadows and bright lights when compared to the Mini 3 series. It also has the same aperture as the Mini 3 series at 1.7 for the main camera. And of course, don't forget about that top 3x camera, which has an f-stop of 2.8. This zoom camera is new to the Air series and does open up a new perspective since 3x zoom could be considered a more comfortable zoom length. It makes things like getting a parallax easier and makes it so that you can stay a safe distance away from something you might want to capture with the drone but don't want to get too close to. I'm also impressed with the clarity of the image coming out of this camera, and I'm glad that DJI lets you apply manual controls when using it. I think the only thing I might have wished for was to have the same exact aperture as the bottom camera. However, 2.8 is an aperture I can work with just fine in situations I've used this zoom camera in. Speaking of aperture, it's something that still isn't controllable on the Air 3, so if you need to do any long exposure photography or something, you'll need an ND filter of some sort. The Mini 3 Pro came with a vertical shooting mode, and now this same mode comes to the Air 3. Sort of. While you can definitely get vertical imagery on the Air 3, it isn't in 4K, but rather 2.7K. This is because the cameras don't physically rotate like with the Mini 3 series, but rather the drone crops into a specific part of what you're shooting and makes a vertical image out of that. This might seem kind of weird, but the idea here is that if you're posting any imagery to social media, those platforms will dumb it down anyway to about 1080p or maybe even lower in some cases. In this case, I'll use my favorite saying, it's better to have and not need than to need and not have. The Mini 3 Pro was also the first drone I encountered that could create 48 megapixel photos. The Air 3 is now the second drone I've encountered that can also do this, but notice how I said create 48 megapixel photos. And this is because in reality, the camera sensors aren't natively capable of taking photos at such a high resolution. The Air 3, like the Mini 3, uses quad rear coding, I believe, to construct a 48 megapixel photo, even though both sensors are truly maxed out at 12 megapixels. It does seem like the 48 megapixel mode has been improved with the Air 3, as it now looks like it correctly exposes things rather than make them darker like on the Mini 3 Pro, but nonetheless, you most likely won't need to use this mode. When it comes to the gimbal, if you're all curious about this, then the controllable tilt range you get with the gimbal goes between 90 degrees downward and 60 degrees upward, which is right in line with the Mini 3 series. The panning range goes between 5 degrees in both the left and right directions. I know we've been talking about the camera a lot on the Air 3, but one thing I do want to reiterate is that I've never owned an Air 2S before, but I do know that one feature people seem to like a ton with that drone was the fact that it could achieve 5.4K footage. If this is important to you, then you might want to be aware of the fact that the Air 3 can only achieve up to 4K footage, 4K 60 FPS footage, that is. When it comes to obstacle avoidance, the Air 3 is the first in the Air series to come with full omnidirectional or 360 degree obstacle avoidance. This is definitely a feature brought down from the Mavic 3 series and is surely a welcome one, since you can rest a little easier knowing that your Air 3 will be able to see almost everything everywhere all at once. And yes, I did say that. Now, notice how I did say almost, because this statement kind of contradicts the fact that the Air 3 did crash during my active track test, but to be fair, I did put the drone into a pretty tough situation. Nonetheless, I still feel like this is a great feature to have, especially for beginners, and of course, it's not a foolproof solution, but it's definitely one that is better to have and not need than to, you know the rest. The Focus Track set of tools is one of my favorite features about DJI's drones, and of course all three modes are here, but Active Track has seen an upgrade where you can now set it to follow you in basically any direction. This is of course due to the all-new 360-degree obstacle avoidance that comes with the Air 3. I was able to test out the Air 3's new Active Track and found it to work well, mostly. What you're seeing right now is a clip from my second unreleased test I did recently, but like I stated before, during that first test I did have a crash due to the fact that the Air 3 for some reason couldn't see the tree branch it ran into. This came as a surprise to me since it was able to avoid other sets of tree branches during the same test and in similar lighting situations, but luckily this thing is also pretty darn durable since the only things that came severely damaged with that test were its propellers. I did end up bringing the drone back to the same position before it crashed, and it did end up being able to get past those tree branches, so I feel like this is something that will get better with updates. One of my very favorite features with my Mavic 3 is waypoints, and I'm happy to say that the Air 3 is the first drone outside of the Mavic series that can use this amazing feature. If you're not aware of what waypoints are, it's essentially a feature that allows you to plot an automated route either by doing so location unseen or by moving the drone to specific points you want it to be at and pressing a button to lock in that particular point. You can also adjust other parameters and have all of this carried out autonomously. Like I said, this is just a really nice feature to have and not have to spend at least $1,500 on a Mavic 3 Classic to get. The Air 3 is rated to withstand winds of up to 12 milliseconds, which is roughly 26.8 miles per hour. You can see here in this sample that it can indeed withstand some winds for sure, but will still get moved around nonetheless. I believe that the winds here were around 27 miles per hour just for reference. It's a good thing that DJI's main product, or one of their main products, is their gimbal technology, because even though the drone is moving around in these winds, you'll still get stable footage, or at the very least, decently stable footage in high winds. One of the things about using any drone is having to worry about battery life, and I can definitely say that this is most likely not going to be the case with the Air 3. I own 3 batteries for both my Mini 3 Pro and Mavic 3, and I use all of them almost always when I'm out shooting for a long time, but with the Air 3, I only end up consistently using 2 of those batteries at the most. This thing has superb battery life for sure, and it still amazes me no matter how many times I keep this thing up in the air. And I've been alluding to it in other parts of this video, but if you'd like to see what battery life could be like, then check out my active track / battery test to see just how long this battery life can potentially last. As a reminder, before and if you decide to view that video, of course, no pressure, you don't have to at all, just keep in mind that active track does double the battery usage. So when not using something like that feature, you're going to get better battery life either way. With all of this Air 3 talk being said, the Air 3 is a drone I wish they came out with when I decided to get my first drone. You've probably seen a ton of videos hyping it up, but in this case, I do think that the hype is warranted. I'd say that aside from the Mini 3 Pro, this is a great starter, intermediate, or advanced UAV that gives you some of the most high-end features, all while giving you that low-end starting price. It's unfortunate that purchasing this drone with the RC2 brings that price up by so much, but I personally think it's worth having just to have that peace of mind in knowing that you'll have an all-inclusive solution that's going to allow you to focus on what really matters while flying a drone. What matters being flying a drone. The addition of waypoints is so welcome, and I'm glad more people now get access to this feature without having to point the way to the bottom of their wallets. Of course, there are other things like the 3x telephoto camera, but that's just an added bonus to our already gracious offering. What I'm trying to say here is that if the Air 3 is going to be your first drone, I don't think you're going to be disappointed, and it gives you enough room to grow with the advanced features that you would actually get on one of DJI's more expensive drones. Okay, so that is pretty much the end of my little rant here, ranting review of the Air 3. So I do hope that this video was helpful, and I do have some more videos coming out whenever I can get the mental capacity to edit all of those things. Editing is not very easy as it seems. Of course, I do hope that you learned something and found this video valuable. And if you did, please do all of or one of the things a normal YouTuber would ask you to do. And if there are any questions or any curiosities about the Air 3, please let me know in the comments. Look forward to more videos. And of course, I have a few videos up about the Air 3. But with that being said, wherever you are in the world, have a great day, a great afternoon, a great evening, or a great night, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching, and I will leave links in the description below to other videos pertaining to the Air 3. And if you are thinking about purchasing an Air 3, please consider using the affiliate links below, as they do help me out. And yeah, we'll go from there. Thank you again.